Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. So this is, I don't know, about number 7 or 8, I think, in our monthly series, and it's been really great to be doing these every month. It not only helps us share the message, but it helps us clarify our thinking as well. And it's been really a useful thing for us, and we hope it's useful for all of you. I'm just going to share my screen, and we've got a few slides as usual to go through. So bear with me while we make that happen. Right, so put that on presentation. So today we really want to talk about, in the context of collaboration, what does it look like to solve problems together? And, I think clients often come to us when they're at the point of, okay, we're all in the room together. We've got to solve this problem. We need an answer. How can you help us make progress? Can you help us find an answer to our tricky problem? That's often where people are at. They're sort of looking for the solution. So by the time they get to us, that tends to be where they are. You letting people in, John?
Yep.
And going to our framework, some of you will have seen this before. If we look here where the arrow is at creating solutions, we'll see it's just one step in the overall frame. And I think it's our experience, it's absolutely our experience, that while people often come to us and often spend a lot of time focusing on this create the solutions part, the thing that makes that possible when we're collaborating on tricky stuff, and we've said this a number of times, is getting clear on the dilemma. What's the problem? Getting some fingerprints on the process. How are we going to work together? That's co-design the process. And those things are part of building our commitment to each other, the commitment to the hard conversations, the commitment to the creativity that we need, the energy we need to bring. And once and if we've built those things, then that makes this co-creation step, the solution step, it makes it work. It makes it work. So often we're brought in at the level of co-create, and the first question we ask is, do we know what the problem is? And 99 times out of 100, it's, well, I know what it is, and that person probably has a different idea. So, back we go a few steps. So I guess for today, that's just a bit of a health warning on the content. But yes, we're talking about solutions, but we're going to presuppose that we've done some of this earlier work, and also recognizing that actually it's a bit of an and, isn't it, John? We sort of find that sometimes it's good to be starting to solve problems while checking in, going back on some of these other things.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. It's sort of an and. There's often a drive for solution. That's where people often are. And so recognizing that that's what people want to move on. But the experience has been that just going back and checking occasionally on some of those elements of pre-work are pretty important to ensure that you can find that those solutions that will actually have an impact.
Yeah, good. So I guess this is really the context that in life, in many of us, all of us, it's a really strong tendency to be confronted with a problem and to look for the answer. We're all trained to do that. We're expected to do that. That seems to be the really strong push. Is we're facing a problem, we need to find an answer. I've spent the last year and a half as a member of an expert panel reporting to the Minister on the future management options of Tuggerah Lakes up on the Central Coast. And it's a classic tangled, wicked, difficult problem. How do we improve the water quality of this shallow coastal lake where there's been 200 years of development around it, which obviously impact the water quality? And there's an enormous push, as there is on many lakes up and down the coast and rivers, an enormous push for the answer. And the answer that people seem to have in mind is breakwaters, to train the entrance, to formalize the entrance. People are have a real strong faith in that as a solution, and all the conversation tends to be that we're looking for the answer. So in that big complex problem, it's just plain as day that people want the answer. That's a push, but it happens at all scales, in all contexts. We do a lot of coaching of clients who are running collaborative processes, and often the conversation is, I've got a workshop to come, next week. How am I going to design the workshop? So as though there's, what's the best way? What's the answer? I've got this problem, and I need in that workshop the right way to tackle that problem with my stakeholders. We see it in people, grappling with service design and delivery. What's the service? What's the best way? What's the best way to roll out our COVID vaccine? What's the answer to the question that is COVID? We keep expecting our leaders, we expect each other, we look for the answer all the time. It's perfectly natural. That's just a really strong tendency.
And I think the other thing about it, Stuart, is that it's the right answer and one answer. It's more that there is one answer, rather than we tend not to look beyond that. So it's that we seek the solution, not a solution. So that tends a tendency, a bit like you were talking about Tuggerah Lakes. There's the thing about weed you mentioned. There's a whole range of things that might be impacting. Is that it's unlikely to be one right answer to something like that.
Yeah, that's right. So if we were to move on, go back from the one answer, this great big thing, which is the solution we are looking for, the one answer. In reality, when we're tackling something difficult and challenging, it's likely to involve a whole range of smaller ways forward. And as you just said, John, managing the lakes is a classic example. People believe the one answer is, if only we build a breakwater that'll allow fresh, flushing, and the water will magically clean itself. And science doesn't stack up. What does stack up is the sense that we're going to have to try about 100 different things to improve the quality of the lake over time. Managing the weeds, different ways to keep pollutants out of our waterways. That's probably behavioural nudges. Small things that make me, the homeowner, not throw my grass clippings in the lake, or whatever it is. There's 1,000 ways that we can work on. Yet the mental model is, come on, someone, give us the answer. There must be an answer. Workshops, bringing back down to the sort of work that we would often get involved in. Instead of looking for the way to run these workshops, it's, why don't we try a different range of things, perhaps with our different groups and different conversations with different nights. Let's test some ways to do this, or let's with different groups do this a little differently. So again, it's just finding some small things to try rather than looking for the answer. An example, if we're designing health services or any service, it can be a bit hard to think about what are the small things we can try, but are there little geographic areas? Are there demographic groups? Are there little pieces of the system that we can tweak and play with? Where's the sandpit that we can play in? So, at one level, that seems probably, I would assume that you're sitting there thinking, well, yeah, that feels pretty obvious to me. And it is. Yet what's also obvious with all the clients we work with is that it ain't so easy to keep this mental model in mind when we're working with stakeholders, because the pressure is on to find the answer. And the pressure often comes from the individual. How will I do this? How will I run next week? How will I get my organization to engage with this? How will I get them to commit to this collaborative process? What's the way? What's the right answer for these questions? And all of these are real little complex and tricky questions, and yet we continue to put pressure on ourselves to find the answer. What is the answer? And our collaborators put pressure on us and each other to find the answer. And all of us live in systems and work in systems and organizations, and there's more pressure there. Everyone's kind of feeling the pressure. So the boss might be saying, I need you to give me the recommendation next week, the answer. How are we going to respond to this? Making it clear whose role it is to solve it, timeframes, we need the answer by. And just being messages like, well, it's our job to solve this. It's our job to deliver this. We need the answer because that's our role. And so the culture and the context inevitably has us looking for the answer. Anything to add to that, John?
Yeah, it's the one right answer. It's media pressure, it's political pressure. And I think you can see it very much in the moment. Example would be the news conference every day about COVID. It's like the pressure on Gladys or anybody to come up with the answer. How are you fixing this? It's like, rather than we don't know, we're not sure, we've got to try a number of things. There's got to be one thing you can do. What's the new rule that'll fix it all? You hear it all the time. Quite frustrating, but you can feel the pressure. The media, we've got to get the answer because then we can report it. It's a mindset, I think, that drives that search for the one right solution. For simple problems, great. For complexities like we're facing, it doesn't work. It fails, I think. So that becomes pretty obvious, but I think we're a bit trapped in the way we always do it.
Yeah, and bringing it back to the collaborative context, because this, again, is all about how do we collaborate. Well, it seems to me that one of the things we haven't talked much in these webinars is the value of collaboration. We need to collaborate most when we are together facing something difficult and challenging. And it's exactly in that context where this dynamic raises its head, but is perhaps part of the dysfunction, because everyone puts pressure on each other and themselves and the government and council, whoever it is, to come up with the answer. And that stymies innovation. So I wonder if anyone would like to just unmute and just share your experience. Does any of that ring true, or do you have a different experience? What's your experience of the drive to find the answer, or otherwise? Is anyone willing to share a little story? What's it like at your place? Do you trap yourself? Is that your job to find the answer?
Hi, Stuart. Ruth here. How are you?
Well, Ruth, how are you? Good,
thanks. This is my day today as a project manager working in local government. This is basically what I'm required to do, is deliver and provide answers and give timelines and budgets and schedules to what are often very, very challenging community infrastructure projects that require significant thought into how we've come up with whatever solutions, may or may not work. So, yeah, everything you've said has very much resonated with me, and I guess I'm still working on ways in which we can introduce this co-design process into some of the major community infrastructure projects.
Ruth, how does that resonate? What are the implications of that pressure on your ability to solve these problems? What does it do?
I think it does also take a bit of a personal toll, because if you're philosophically opposed to just going in there and providing an answer that's going to placate some people, it might be a political response, but then you can see as the person at the centre of it that there's so much more that needs to be worked through. There's opportunities to do it better. That, you know, we're going to just do something that's going to then create a flow-on effect of other issues down the track. So, you know, it takes a toll. And then there's this issue of having to perform. You know, my job is, I am the senior project manager. I have to do my job. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure. And I guess I just often look for the small wins and the small opportunities to provide the influence in areas where I still can.
Yeah. Yes, that's thanks for sharing, Ruth. That's really valuable. And of course, we're now going to give you the answer. No, we're not going to do that. What we are going to give you is, I guess this comes from thinking and working in complex spaces, on complex projects, where it is really hard to find the answer. And if I go back to Tuggerah Lakes, lakes up and down the coast, all around Australia, all around the world, present really difficult management challenges because urban development, life gets in the way of clean water in 1,000 different ways, and they are almost insoluble. But so the search for the answer is folly, and it's folly in many contexts. So what do? Well, we don't throw up our hands because, as you've just said, Ruth, we're expected to deliver something. And I think our learning, some of the theory that we've learned and seen applied is it's about shifting the mindset to the extent you can within the constraints, is to just experiment, to try things, to flip from solving into working to understand and find responses to the complex issues we see. How would you describe this bit, John? What would you say?
I think it was a client, after doing some work, just crystallized it for me. She said, what I learned, John, was in complex situations, rather than try and force the one answer, just to try things. It was a really nice statement. It was about, what do you mean try stuff? She said, rather than that eternal search for the thing that we know will work, I just try some things, see what works. If it doesn't work, I try something different. Yeah, moving away from that definition of insanity, trying the same thing and expecting a different answer, to just say, okay, that didn't take us where we wanted to get to, let's try something else. And very much an and model. Rather than it's this, it could be this and this and this, and we can try a few things, which are some of the ones we talked about there, some small steps forward rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. So I guess it's giving yourself a bit of choice to actually try a few things and testing them and seeing what actually gets you closer to where you need to get to. Because in a complex situation, a bit like that lake example, you might try something with the community and something with the fishermen and something with somebody else. And then you might say, okay, well, that's helping a bit, so we do more of that. That's not helping, so we'll stop doing that and do something different. So a pretty simple model of just try stuff and moving from that, from an or, it's got to be this or this, and we pick one, to more, well, we can pick this and this and this and try it. But smaller, I think, like you said, Ruth, not putting it all in, dumping it on one thing, but saying, okay, let's put our eggs in a few baskets and trying stuff. And thinking about it as learning, not failure. Because I think sometimes if you think, well, it's got to be right or I'll fail, and that can paralyze any activity. So it's more about, what could we try that could help us learn? So it takes away that risk-averse nature a little of actually trying some things.
And I've put there the word sandpit, and Ruth, or any of you, it's you can't experiment with the project necessarily. You've got to deliver, absolutely. So it's where in the work towards that, where is there flexibility and freedom? Where can you play a bit? Where can you try stuff? Even if it's how am I going to communicate this message with my stakeholders? I'm not sure what's the best way to do that. Well, let's try A, B, and C. That's the mindset that we're working with here. It's rather than saying there must be a best way to communicate with my stakeholders on this issue this week. It's actually, how could we know what's the best way? let's try these different things and see what works for next time.
You're still looking for the outcomes, but you're trying a few things, then testing which ones help deliver towards those outcomes. So it's not stepping away from still making choices and delivering. It's just the mindset about what to look for and what you might then, how you might deliver it.
And yeah, we constantly we trap ourselves, John, don't we? And we hear clients always trapped in, how are we going to do this? Oh, this will be the way to do it. And it's a way to do it. Yeah. So how to help us do this creatively. And we have found this little model that comes from some practitioners in the field to be really handy in challenging me to think about, well, if I'm going to try stuff, what does, let's call it an experiment, what does one of those little trials or experiments or pilots look like? And it's easy also to get pretty trapped in business as usual thinking at this stage. So we use this little list to help challenge us to try things that are going to be different, because it's these things that might take us in a new direction and actually deliver unexpected benefits. Try something that's completely naive, like the 9-year-old child would say, why don't we just do that? Yeah, okay, well, let's give that a try. The obvious good idea, well, we probably shouldn't ignore that. If it's so obvious, let's give it a crack. Things that are designed not to work, or we would expect them not to work, I guess would be the other way to say that. And we might try those because what if it works? Oh, wow. Why did that work? I thought it was going to fail, but gee, that's taught us something about how to deliver this service into this group, like vaccinating our Indigenous people out in the far west. There's probably ways that are going to work and ways that aren't going to work. Try something from left field, something out of the box, a crazy idea, because that crazy idea might teach us something that might even work. And importantly, try things small, fast, things that we can try tomorrow. What can we try tomorrow? Not what's the next 6 months project going to look like, because that's not an experiment, that's a project. What are we going to try tomorrow that's going to help us learn? So it's this little model that we find incredibly useful. Now, there's not a huge amount of time left, so we've got a tool here. I think suffice to say, we find this useful in this space. It's just, so fundamentally it's a brainstorm tool. We all know brainstorming. This is a tool to help us do that. But what we've added into this is these elements to help us get out of business as usual thinking and to create some ideas that we might not have thought about.
So I think the brainstorm part of it actually makes sure that you hear from all the players, which is often a challenge when there's somebody with a strong right answer. So it's a way of actually breaking down that, okay, there could be a number of different answers, but within those number of different answers, using those points Stuart just showed you, we call them mice, to help get diversity in the experiments. So it challenges people to move from, okay, the few obvious ones from a few of the people to lots of ideas from everybody that range across from the obvious to the really naive, to the crazy, to the stupid. And so it actually gives you more choice in which to try stuff. And you're obviously not going to be silly about this, and you're going to sit within your constraints. So some things will say we can try that, but that's a little outside what we're able to do. That's okay. But I think what we find is it actually challenges people. And oftentimes when they start to think a little differently, you start to see, oh, okay, there's some other ways we can look at that. So it opens up people's minds to it. It's very generous too in terms of drawing people in. So it does a lot of other things about how do you actually be more respectful of all the perspectives. So it's valuable from all those other things about collaborating more effectively too. So quite a respectful process, but I think the key is it gets that diversity of ideas to try to fit into that complex space where you just don't want to just go with the one right answer. You want to actually give yourself a bit of choice.
Yeah, and again, bring it back to the collaborative context. we want to be, if we're trying a bunch of these things, we try them in parallel. So it's not just one, try many. And we want to be trying and developing and trying these with our stakeholders. We don't want to be doing them to our stakeholders. You know, that's because that's not collaboration. That's lab rats. And this is not that. We want to be tapping into, as John said, the diversity, the smarts, the creativity, the naivety and the brilliance of our stakeholders to say, have we thought of this? Why don't we try this week? Or over in my group, this might work. Let's give that a shot. That's the collaborative aspect of this, absolutely. So just to wrap up, really, I think the dominant message, and I don't think we can overstate the importance of this, just given all the pains that we see our clients with, that seeking the answer can be the trap. And it doesn't matter how many times we have this conversation with them, clients always find themselves, and we do it too, asking for, gee, you know, what's the way I'm going to do that? And it really puts pressure on them to know how to do that, because that's my job, right? I should know how to do that.
It's exactly as Ruth described before.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a trap.
Yeah. How could I know how to do that? Well, let's try this, and this. And I'm not sure what's the best way to do it. So let's just, you know, cut ourselves some slack. So it lets us sleep a little easier. Learning is really important. So reframing the whole collaboration as a learning process, just as much as a solving process. In order to solve, we've got to learn. And the only way to learn is to try stuff together. We can't learn from just trying to roll out a program. That doesn't work. Just try stuff fundamentally. And ultimately, we want everyone's fingerprints on what we're doing.
It gives you ownership of both process and solution. That people are more likely to implement what you come up with if they feel they're part of it.
So that's all we wanted to say, really. Happy to take any questions. John and I can stick around. If you have to go, then go, but I'm very happy to continue the conversation. So anyone got any thoughts, any questions, any observations about any of that?
Hi, Stuart, it's Catherine.
Catherine?
I just thought that from my experience, similar to Ruth, with project management expectations, a huge part of that role is managing expectations up the chain typically, and that those trying the little things, offering pilots and things like that is often just a process of trying to manage expectations that we might have found a temporary answer or a part of the answer, and that along the way there might be changes to that answer based on an evolving situation of gathering information, that you're never fully at a finite solution ever. Even once you've written the report, you've closed the report, it'll be opened again, there'll be amendments to it, there'll be a second report, there'll be things that will be ongoing as more information comes to light, that it's just that managing expectations to say there's no line in the sand. We're not saying this is the end of the story. This is where we are today. And we may get to another point. We're going to try something else, go down this other little path, try this, get some more information. It might change this temporary answer, and then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So even the answer isn't always the answer. It's
that's right. Yeah.
Just a step. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks. Charlotte, you're still there. Anything to add or any questions?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah, I was just actually typing a note to say thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of what you said, totally rings true. I guess for myself, I'm in state government positions, so you reiterating about what you can do, but within the constraints. We have a lot of constraints, obviously, resourcing, priorities, and so forth. So yeah, it would be interesting to try and implement some of what you've said, but within the those challenges, or whether we can see that as opportunities. I'll have to see. But yeah, thank you. Really interesting.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Yeah, just sort of thinking about that before you go, if it's not too late. A client I've been working with, big infrastructure, and of course they are building a road, and they've got to deliver the road, and there's time frames, and all their hands are tied around that. There's nothing there they can experiment with at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, they are learning how to work together, and so there's plenty of room for them to practice and try different things about how the client works with the contractor. At this meeting, let's try something else next meeting. Let's try a slightly different agenda. Let's see what outcomes we get from that, if that helps us have a different conversation. So within the massive constraints, the immovable constraints, there's huge room for trying about how do we do this together. And
that's the process tries, Stuart.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something I would encourage you to have a think about. Because there's usually more room there, and that's really still important.
Yeah, and I guess in some ways, some of the smaller aspects of project management where you do have greater flexibility and can be a bit more creative, you can investigate things there rather than looking at the project as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pleasure.